Conservative American Message, hosted by the one, the only, Cam Lau. It is Monday, October 30th, 2023, and welcome to the 48th episode of our podcast. The last true Democrat president, John F. Kennedy, said, "Politics is a jungle, torn between doing the right thing and staying in office." I have to apologize, guys. I have had a lot on my plate the last few weeks between my real job and my family, so I didn't have any time to do any episodes. Sometimes you just gotta take time to focus on what's truly important. But I haven't given up on the show yet, and we're back in full force this week. So, that being said, don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Conservative American Message on Instagram, Facebook, X, Truth Social, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, and everywhere else where we can be found. It also goes a long way when you guys share this show on social media, so please continue to help us grow our audience.
So after much prayer and deliberation, I have decided to suspend my campaign for president effective today.
As the battle for who will win second place for the Republican presidential nomination rages on, we have seen many of the lesser candidates like Larry Elder and those types drop out, but none of them were polling over 1%. Until this week, when former Vice President Mike Pence finally called it quits. And it was about time. He's probably one of the most disliked conservatives among all Republicans, regardless of their opinion on Trump. He is as establishment as they come. Nobody took his campaign seriously from the very beginning, and likewise, nobody is surprised to see it come to an early end.
I came here to say it's become clear to me. This is not my time. So after much prayer and deliberation, I have decided to suspend my campaign for president effective today. Now, I'm leaving this campaign, but let me promise you, I will never leave the fight for conservative values, and I will never stop fighting to elect principled Republican leaders to every office in the land. So help me God.
Of course, his campaign was only slightly more of a joke than the others who are still running against Trump. It will be interesting to see if he's inspired any more early quitters. It shouldn't be much longer before most of them realize how ridiculous it is. And hey, I guess props to Mike Pence for figuring it out first. I do believe, honestly, that Pence was mostly a good man for the majority of his political career. He got a lot of good stuff done, and did the right thing right up until he confirmed the phony election. But doing the right thing and being a good man doesn't always yield positive outcomes. It certainly didn't pan out for a Minneapolis cop a few years ago who served his community as an officer of the law for decades just to have his name slandered across the nation and the world because of the accidental death of a drug-addicted criminal. I'm of course referring to Derek Chauvin, the officer convicted of murder for the death of George Floyd. But why do I bring it up now? Well, because his attorneys are now petitioning the Supreme Court to rule a mistrial due to the ridiculous circumstances around the entire case and trial proceedings that took place. As we all know, the literal autopsy revealed that George Floyd died of a drug overdose, not from having a knee on him or suffocating. But, of course, the facts were never truly considered by the jury because they had no choice but to convict him or see their city burned to the ground. Black Lives Matter already had done billions in damage across the country and were explicitly threatening the jury. With the whole trial being so publicized, it made it impossible to give Chauvin a fair trial. Not to mention that one of the jurors lied and was actually a participating member in the BLM riots. So with the Supreme Court rolling out lots of controversial opinions lately, I guess the attorneys see this as a last chance effort to right the wrongs that were done to their client, who is currently serving out his 22.5-year sentence. But it does seem unlikely that the Supreme Court will actually consider the appeal, let alone even side with Chauvin if they did. I mean, they receive thousands upon thousands of appeal requests, and they have to be very discerning in where they are going to find the most impactful ways to enact justice. So in all of the time that I missed, the House of Representatives still didn't elect a new speaker until just this last week, so I guess I didn't really miss out much by skipping the podcast. It was quite the process. First, they nominated the GOP establishment pick Steve Scalise that we had talked about, but he failed to receive a majority to be elected to the speakership. And after a whole mess of more party infighting, they then came up with Jim Jordan, who was the pick of most of the Trump-oriented or so-called MAGA Republican camp. But after multiple nominations and floor votes, Jim Jordan also failed to make it. And just for the record, despite rumblings about Trump early on, the Donald was never actually nominated for the position. Ultimately, it was Mike Johnson who was the compromise between the Trumpers and the establishment GOP. And I'd never even heard of the guy, but maybe that's a good thing. He claims that his goal is going to be to reunite the GOP and get everyone working together to halt the Biden agenda. To the average person, all of this political infighting and power shifts may seem really childish and a real waste of time, especially as a Republican. I mean, you may feel as though the party is starting to split up and that we're displaying weakness to the American people. But I have a different view. I think that this entire showdown, as overly dramatic as it was absolutely necessary and a defining moment in history. Hear me out. The Republican Party is not weak. The values that the party stands for are commonly held by all factions within the whole. It's about the philosophy where the party is somewhat fractured. You see, the older generations that lived through the Reagan Revolution have already seen the GOP transformed for the better, and they want to conserve what exists now. But the downside to being preoccupied with that kind of conservatism is that we will fall behind. Instead, it is my belief, along with many in the younger generation, that we need to actively put up a fight against the opposing values that will ultimately lead to the complete failure of our nation. This philosophy is held by those of us who have looked to Trump as a new and better Reagan, who will usher the GOP into the 21st century and bring the fight to the doorstep of the left. You see, Trump hasn't divided the party at all. Rather, he has emboldened it. Trump showed a whole generation of young people that these values that we all hold aren't just for fuddy-duddies and Jesus freaks. They're common sense American values that will help everyone in this country succeed. So I think that Matt Gaetz and the other trailblazers in Congress like him are doing the right thing when they follow Donald's example and shake things up. They're creating real change, something that the establishment right hasn't done in like 40 years. It's not about blowing up the party, it's about redefining it. On the other hand, the Democrats may appear to have everything whole and united, but nothing could be further from the truth. The average American Democratic voter is a Kennedy follower whose ties to the Democratic Party go back for generations. But the new progressive left has pushed things way too far, and a great divide is silently tearing the Democrats apart. I'm going to make a prediction now that within the next 50 years, we will see a dramatic change in the American political landscape that will involve the deconstruction of the Democratic Party. And something else more sinister may arise from the ashes. All we can hope for is that Republicans can be bold enough to ensure that whatever becomes of the insane lefties that want to murder children and give everyone new genitalia are in the minority by a long shot. Well, that's all I have time for, literally. Were you offended by this podcast? Good. Thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate you all. Have a great week, and stay conservative.